Let me tell you a short story. There was a man who walked on earthquakes. The ground shook beneath his feet, and he would often stumble and fall. The man tried desperately to ignore the trembling ground and go about his life powering through. At times, this trembling would quiet and the man felt a sharp relief, able to fully engage in the world. However, sooner or later the trembling would begin again. It seemed to the man that no one else felt these earthquakes but him, and so he tried desperately to hide it. It took everything in him to not fall each time the earth trembled. The man would return home each day exhausted. He looked to the clouds and they whispered to him, "Why do you run from yourself?" The man looked down at the ground beneath his feet. "If I stay still for too long, the ground will open up and swallow me whole. Maybe you should let it," the clouds replied. The man felt the ground trembling beneath him, but this time he didn't try to ignore it or run, and the ground opened up and swallowed him whole. In the abyss within, the man saw a spark. It was sharp and bright, and it drifted closer to him. The man realized this was the cause of the earthquakes. Curious, he approached the spark and touched it. The man was flooded with grief. He wept and wept until he could cry no more. The sharp spark had now softened, and it landed gently into the man's hands. The man brought the softened spark to his chest and was flooded with a power and life he had never felt before. He re-emerged from the abyss, back in his home, to a stillness he had never known. He now walked through the world with the power of earthquakes in every step. This story reflects the profound fear of being in stillness. It points to the great mystery of our feelings and the very real force they are in our collective lives. Feelings affect and influence every facet of human existence and are so often misunderstood or avoided, leading to countless conflict and suffering. Everything from modern psychology to ancient religion has appeared to try and address this. What are the implications if we could truly understand and transform our individual and collective relationship to our feelings? What power could be within our reach? You're watching Archetypal Wisdom. Join me in exploring the symbolic truths and mysteries of humankind. Remember to like and subscribe. Now, back to the video. Is it not remarkable to stop and think about how much our lives are run by our feelings? In fact, perhaps it is more accurate to say our lives are run by our unconscious feelings, which is probably a more troubling reflection than remarkable for most people. Troubling because it reminds us of the degree to which our life is influenced by parts of ourselves we are not even aware of, much like the man in the story whose unconscious grief was creating earthquakes in his life. Yet this becomes remarkable when we stop to think about what our lives could look like if we did become aware of this. For example, think about how many times one might have sabotaged a potential friendship because they were convinced they didn't like the potential friend. They were convinced that they just didn't like their sense of humor, or the potential friend made a remark that they were certain was aimed towards them. They think nothing of it until an acquaintance innocently makes the observation that the potential friend they cut out reminded them of an old bully from their younger years. Upon hearing this, the individual might have the sneaking suspicion that maybe the main reason they cut the potential friend out was because of these echoes of a painful past, as opposed to the potential friend themselves. But most people will swiftly sweep these moments of insight under the rug because they imply too much. That's a thread they would rather not pull on lest their world be unraveled. They would rather keep moving as fast as possible, clinging to the comfort of what they think they know. Yet imagine the opportunity that could open up if they were able to be still and not so unconsciously influenced in their life decisions. In the hustle and bustle of our lives with work, relationships, and the ever-alluring distraction of the online realm, it seems that the odds are stacked against us to be still. I can't help but wonder if the busyness of modern life is a natural outgrowth of our terrible fear of being still as a collective. After all, to be still means to be with yourself fully, all the damaged and unaddressed parts, as well as the familiar and comfortable. When I stop to consider this, I am struck by the terrifying power of feelings. Feelings influence individuals and nations like gods playing with clay. With such epic force compelling so much of our existence, no wonder we try to not stop and truly face it, just as the man ran from the earthquakes beneath him. Yet in our current time, there is no shortage of psychological and emotional disorders such as anxiety, depression, ADHD, the list goes on. This rise in mental and emotional disorders has led modern psychology to value a great many practices which encourage stillness. Everything from mindfulness to somatic touch have become highly utilized to treat a great many disorders. Mindfulness teaches the practice of one becoming tuned in to the moment through breath or gentle movements such as walking or stretching. Somatic touch is focused on the individual getting in touch with their body and physical sensations as a way of grounding them in the moment. Both of these practices focus on grounding the individual not only in the present moment, but also within themselves. In fact, the best way to think of these practices is as an approach to developing a truly intimate relationship with ourselves. This is often avoided at all costs until the pain of not doing this outweighs the pain of doing it, just as the man's exhaustion encouraged him to finally face his earthquakes. But what we run from so intensely is still just a feeling. So why is it so hard for so many of us? Feelings are often relegated to an infantilized box, an inconvenient addition to our experience which usually gets in the way of our tasks or knowledge. People who are influenced heavily by feelings are often associated with being overly sentimental or terribly impulsive. To some extent this is fair, yet it seems clear to me that these types of people are just those who demonstrate explicit examples of being influenced by feelings. But those who dismiss feelings or reduce them to an inconvenience perhaps have the biggest blind spot to being usurped by feelings. For example, say someone identifies as being a very rational individual, and while of course they have feelings, they don't make decisions with their feelings. They believe they have cracked the code of not being thrown off course by their feelings. Yet they ironically are very much influenced by the feelings lurking in the abyss of their nature. Let's say when they were young they were punished for being too emotional. Or perhaps they were mocked if they let their feelings guide their choices, and so they walled off their feelings. They became clinical in their outlook, severed from feeling altogether. Every decision they make is so well thought out and structured that it's hard to argue with it. Yet if one looks closely, they recognize a punitive pattern in all of their so-called logical decisions. Their severed feeling of anger is spilling through their calculated decisions. Then in time they start having terrible anxiety. Despite their exclusively logical self-image, they become overwhelmed with unaddressed feelings all tangled together, manifesting as anxiety. Confused and compromised, they are forced to take some time off work, only to realize that they have a terrible grief they have been avoiding, just as the man in the story found the sharp spark causing the earthquakes. Natural forces such as earthquakes or hurricanes are a fitting metaphor for feelings because they themselves are also natural forces. Considering the incredible force of feelings, no wonder we develop all sorts of disorders if we are unable to relate to them effectively. No wonder we can have a profound exhaustion from the constant avoidance and repression of feelings. If we really think about the tremendous power of feelings, what would happen if we could truly stop running from ourselves and instead let the ground swallow us up? I can't help but wonder how that power could be redistributed in our psyche and personality. Perhaps this is wishful thinking, but I can't shake the sense that if we could make peace with our feelings and truly unify them, we could be transformed beyond recognition. In fact, it appears that there are archetypal religious ideas which speak to this directly. For example, if we take a look at Jonah and the fish in the Bible, Jonah runs from God's instruction to warn his enemies to change so that they may be forgiven. In his avoidance, Jonah finds himself in a terrible storm. He accepts the storm is his fault and lets himself be swallowed by a great fish of the deep. Inside the belly of the fish, Jonah makes his peace with God, and after 3 days and nights is brought back to the shore and becomes God's messenger, saving the lives of his enemies. Or if we take a look at the Passion story, Jesus accepts the pain of the crucifixion in order to transform the world. For 3 days and nights he dies and visits Hades, taking the keys and rising as the eternal Son of God. In both stories there is a clear, similar motif of going through an excruciating process of pain, going into the depths, leading to a powerful transformation and rebirth. This, to me, seems to speak to this ancient idea that transformation is indeed possible if we have the courage to face that which we run from. If we can be still and accept the pain that we are so afraid of, we will be transformed from people who walk on the unstable footing of earthquakes to people who walk with the power of earthquakes. So what exactly does it mean to walk with the power of earthquakes? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. That's part of what captivates me, the great mystery of it. Perhaps it's about moving through the world with a sense of completeness, no longer fractured or held back by the resistance of unacknowledged feelings. When I think about the incredible power of emotions, I wonder what might be possible if we truly stopped running from them, if we faced them, integrated them, and allowed them to move within us freely. It seems to me that when feelings are unified and distributed within us without resistance, they have the potential to transform us in ways that are hard to imagine. Could this be what was meant by the kingdom of heaven being within? A state where we are no longer at war with ourselves, but instead in harmony, guided by a power greater than our fears and defenses. When I think about Christ's teachings, the miraculous healings, the profound peace, the radical love, it feels like a glimpse into what's possible when one truly embraces the fullness of being. In the end, maybe it's not about fully understanding what it means, but being willing to step into the mystery, to face the trembling ground, let it swallow us, and emerge transformed. Maybe the power of earthquakes is simply the power of life itself, raw, uncontrollable, and awe-inspiring, waiting for us to stop resisting and embrace it fully. You've been watching Archetypal Wisdom. Remember to like and subscribe. Stay wise.